I'm grateful to rise in this debate about securing the future for Canadians, Madam Speaker. With your indulgence, this is also my inaugural speech. As I first stepped into the chamber, Fanny Wedro, or Fanny as she's belovedly known, was on my mind. The last I saw her, she had offered up a bottomless spread of her legendary blintzes. I loved Fanny, and even as her body began to fail, it was the intensity of her eyes I remembered. This is a woman of indomitable strength. She survived the Holocaust. She built a business and a family with her husband, Leo. She founded the Canadian Magen David. At the University of Calgary Convocation, where she received her honorary doctorate of laws, the woman who was forced to shovel dirt over Nazi mass graves, which would have included her mother, the woman who escaped a fire-engulfed ghetto, take refuge in empty pits, hid in a forest for nearly a year, said this: "Don't think that standing here before you is a 95-year-old woman. In front of you is a 14-year-old girl whose life was taken away, was left with no parents, no grandparents, no relatives, no one. Yet I had to go out into the world, and let me tell you, it's a wonderful world. Spread light into the world. Cherish and respect your country." Shadows define the light, Madam Speaker. In her final days, as her new Member of Parliament, I made a promise to Fanny that I would fight those who would tear this country down. I bade her farewell with a kiss on both her cheeks, and on her insistence, I took a blintz on the road. Fanny died days before her birthday on August 27th this year. As I stood at the entrance to this chamber, her memory was the blessing I carried here with me. 5 days later, I watched this chamber be desecrated by the presence of a Nazi whose hate-filled collaborators were Fanny's oppressors. In the last 21 days, I've watched the world forget never again, replaced instead with the horrifying resurgence of the ancient hatred unleashed by tyrants determined to unravel our alliances. An anti-Semitic regime in Iran, the anti-Semitic pogrom at a Russian airport, Beijing's anti-Semitic propaganda imposed on its people, mobs across our streets glorifying terror and death, trafficking in tropes, hearts having turned to darkness. A soul I treasure deeply in Israel today reminded me recently the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. Across every issue I have watched debated in this chamber, I don't see a determined government rising to this moment. I see indifference and the politics of division. The single mother who may not have had a home come December, waking up to news that one part of the country would get relief from the carbon tax destroying her dreams, but that she would not. Waking up to an indifferent government offering up electing Liberals as her answer, rather than axing the hated carbon tax for everyone. The newcomer young couple, presented with performative announcements rather than shovels in the ground to build homes, generate jobs, unshackling the lives they wish to lead. The senior, for whom after paying into the system for a lifetime, watches the invisible thief of inflation denying them the retirement they were promised, the retirement they earned. These are my neighbors. Across this country, our neighbors are hurting, and for them, the promise of Canada is broken. As I stand here today, I represent a riding of people, including former MP Bob Benson, a gentleman businessman, who goes to work every day for an energy sector under systemic attack by a government indifferent to the consequences of its decisions. Unlocking our resources, enabling investment, is the single most important nation-building decision Canada could make today for the benefit of every Canadian. The Just Transition legislation will kill directly 170,000 jobs. It will reward our rivals in Russia and Iran as they scale production, subvert sanctions, fund their war machine at discounted prices to Beijing. It punishes our friends who need more Canada. At precisely the time Canadian resources represent over $3 trillion that would fuel, feed, and secure the world, bring home paychecks for our people, build energy projects reducing emissions, build economic reconciliation with First Nations, rebuild our armed forces. This Prime Minister and his radical NDP Liberals repeats Trudeau the father's failed legacies. That of the National Energy Program that former MP Bobby Sparrow ferociously fought, of rampant inflation, of nonstop tax hikes. One retired prison guard in Eastern Ontario told me, in his lifetime, He has never seen the government give money for food since wartime. Do you remember what Preston Manning said when eulogizing his father, the premier who unleashed Canada's energy sector? He said, "Do not let apathy do to Canada what wars and depressions and hard times were unable to do. Continue to build. Continue to build." I take heart in knowing that it wasn't just democracies that won the wars of their age, it was also conservatives. It was Sir John A. Macdonald who fashioned and forged what today is among the oldest democracies on earth, upon ideas of freedom and ordered liberty rather than linguistic or religious division. It was Sir Winston Churchill who was recruited after experiments with appeasement failed to confront fascism with iron will while cautioning of an iron curtain in the age to come. It was Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Brian Mulroney who pursued policies of peace through strength to defeat communism and reverse bad economic decisions. I rise in this Parliament in a seat once held by Preston Manning, who built the modern Conservative movement, and by Stephen Harper, whose Conservative government, through global economic calamity, delivered a prospering Canada at peace with itself, confident in its future. Today, in this Parliament, the leader of His Majesty's official opposition, our Conservative leader, the next Prime Minister of Canada, has been described by Lord Daniel Hannan of Kingsclere as the most important Conservative in the world today. Because, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, his is the leadership of conviction, not division. Amid all the crime, chaos, drugs and disorder, economic anxiety and diplomatic disaster, I've been reflecting on what constitutes the kind of strength to be the fighter my neighbors elected. In Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis says this about government: "It is easy to think the state has a lot of different objects, military, political, economic, and whatnot. But in a way, things are much simpler than that. The state exists simply to promote and protect the ordinary happiness of human beings in this life. A couple chatting over a fire, friends having a game of darts in a pub, a man reading a book in his own room or digging in his own garden. That is what the state is there for. And unless they are helping to increase or prolong such moments, all the laws, parliaments, armies, courts, police, economics, etc., are simply a waste of time." If what Lewis described is the purpose of the state, then Natan Sharansky later writes about the resilience of the people for whom the state serves. He describes a town square test, one in which anyone can walk into the middle of a town square, say anything they want, however odious it might be. The test distinguishes between a society of freedom from a society of fear, a country capable of fierce debates, or one ruled by state-controlled social unrest and mob rule, of true patriot love at the heart of our national life, or the indifference of a financial and moral corruption destroying it, of those who build versus those determined to tear everything down. In these 8 long years, we have seen an NDP Liberal wrecking ball take aim at and undermine 175 years of democratic tradition, resulting in broken trust across every institution in this country. We have seen this Parliament and its honour be desecrated in a chamber where government and opposition are separated by 3 sword lengths to engage in the fierce debates defining their age, with words not with war, where parliamentarians are elected as servants, not as masters of their people. All this as clouds of war gather across faraway oceans, wars in the Middle East, war in Europe, the steady drumbeat of war in the Indo-Pacific. Wars now threatening to overtake our streets, requiring leaders of conviction to step forward, pursue policies of peace through strength, and unleash the freest, most prosperous country on earth. So let me, Madam Speaker, rise in this Parliament today, in the home of our democracy, as its newest member from Calgary Heritage, with an answer to the mob of woke ideologists and their allied extremists rolling across this land, with an answer to those foreign and domestic that would undo our democracy, imperil lives, erase history, attack our freedoms. Calgary Heritage is a rock that will be the rock that the woke wave of tyranny will crash and fail upon. Calgary Heritage will be a strong voice and a chorus of voices restoring the promise of this great country. Our heritage, our inheritance, is the very promise of Canada itself. And for all the single mothers, we're going to restore the promise. For the senior, we're going to restore the promise. For the young couple and newcomer, we're going to restore the promise. We will never give in, never back down, never surrender before the cancel culture rage. And to my dear and beloved friend, Fanny Wedro, I will never forget my promise to you. We will spread light into the world. We will cherish and respect this country, and we will restore the promise of Canada for you. Thank you.
Great job.
Questions and comments?